Hey guys, welcome to Real Men Get It Done. If you are new to my channel, thank you for connecting. My channel is all about fatherhood, empowering men to be the best version of themselves so they can take care of themselves and home. And again, we want to encourage and just uplift our fathers. So this episode is really special, near and dear to my heart, because I'm actually interviewing one of my closest friends, Aaron Pettis, who actually is incarcerated right now for robbing a bank. Spending up to 15 years incarcerated. So I want you guys to tune in. This will be a cool story of just hearing about hope, about redemption, and how he changed his life around. And he's almost on the verge of getting out. So from bank robber to author, I want you to hear Aaron's story, to be motivated, encouraged, and also want to have you pick up his new book, Riverside, Epiphany. All the links will be in the description below. So let's get right into it and connect with Aaron Pettis. Real men get it done.
Box, you have certain amounts of time to do certain things in, so it's like a perfect metaphor.
All right. So for everybody, we actually are starting the interview over. We got cut off, but we're gonna actually start back from the beginning. So that was a good lead and intro, so we're just going to jump right into it to connect, and then we may have to do one more quick call, but let's start back at the beginning. Aaron, talk to me. Tell me a little bit about your story. Let's hit it in quick chunks of just how you ended up, first of all, just in prison.
Well, how I ended up in prison, I think I ended up in prison because I didn't know how to deal with grief. I think that growing up, I was raised by like I was telling you, by my single mom and my brother. My older brother was my father figure, and I watched him and emulated his life. And I think that in doing that, I didn't really see any, I don't want to say emotions, because he had emotions, but just being soft. So I think that I was trying to be hard, being hard, ended up breaking me because I didn't know how to deal with the grief. And so, that led me into drugs. So I soaked my grief in drugs, which then led to having to supply for that drug habit, which I had already been dabbling in as a teenager. But the drug addiction definitely led me down to a deeper life in the criminal lifestyle, really.
And so what you're describing, again, isn't too unfamiliar, I think, to folks in general, just like, especially I think in the African American community. And just to give you all some backstory for Aaron, he was raised by a single mom. Aaron's is biracial, dad's black, mom's white, but mom raised him. And you were telling me about experience where a friend, one of your best friends, actually got murdered, and that kind of began spiraling you down that road. But I think that's the issue that a lot of us don't deal with just as men in general, in terms of grief, of counseling, of trying to get support. We're always taught that we're supposed to wear it on our shoulders and just have the weight of our world on our shoulders. And sometimes we need that professional help to help us get through. Otherwise, we end up turning to the negative things, the drugs, the alcohol, to help us cope and kind of numb that pain. So that was your journey. You spiraled out of control, starting to do that, drugs and pretty much being a criminal to support your habit. Would you say that was a piece of it, or did you also end up, I guess to a certain degree, just liking the criminal element and just kind of doing you?
Well, I think in my teenage years it was enjoyable. to be real with you, I mean, I was a young man and I had no direction, and so the excitement of committing crimes was exciting, for lack of a better word. But then when like you were saying, when my friend passed away, I think it changed. It was no longer about that. It was about supplying a drug habit in order to drown my grief. So, and I think that they became dependent on each other. I needed to commit more crimes in order to calm my grief, but then the drug addiction doesn't fix anything. Because drowning yourself in drugs is not a relieving of grief. It actually just exacerbates the problem. And so that grief became more and more and more as I fed it with drugs, and which then cause me to have to do more crimes to supply that drug habit, which is a never-ending circle that only can end in two ways: death or prison. And luckily for me, it was prison. So.
Okay, now talk to us a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about, and tell the audience a little bit about your big bid, because obviously you kind of were in juvie back and forth a couple years
Right.
here. Then what was this big sentence that you've been serving 15 years for? What ended up happening with this particular one that just got you where you're at?
Okay. Well, I got out of prison, and my cellie in my last prison bid was a bank robber, and he, like I said, like we were talking about earlier, when you have criminals around each other, what do they talk about? Crime. So, he explained to me the ins and outs of bank robbery, and to me, in my, broken mind, I thought I could do this. And so I got out of prison with no intent to do good. I was still broken, and so I started committing bank robberies, and ended up getting caught in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and sentenced to what essentially would be 20 years. But that was the journey and thought to bank robbery from petty crime, really, from before.
Wow. And just to let the audience know, because I know we've talked a little bit about this, but just echoing a little bit about what you said about prisons. Like prisons, our prison system is really meant, especially for, I think, for men of color.
This call is from a federal prison.
Especially for men of color. I mean, when that system grabs you, it doesn't want to let go. So you're not being rehabilitated when you are in the county jail and then move up to maybe medium security, maximum security. You're really pretty much being taught how to be a better criminal. Until that, and it may sound, I don't want to make it sound like it's I don't know what to make it sound like, but it's not, until you find that strength, I guess, within, and you can tell us, I want to hear a little bit about that story, but that strength of to want to do right and make a conscious decision to do right. Because I'll give you a quick story. My wife is in corrections, as you know, and she says when people are in prison, of course, that's the most time where they're seeking out God, whether it's being a Christian, whether it's being a good Muslim, whether it's Jehovah's Witness, because all you have is time on your hands. So men, and sometimes men cycle through all the faiths all the time, and they're really religious while they're inside because all they have is time. But then when they go back out to the same element that they've been involved in, it's very easy for that to just erase and then get back into the element that you were caught yourself in. So I think us sometimes from the outside, or being in the outside, not having to be incarcerated, not having to go through those lives of crime, we don't get it. It doesn't click with us because we're like, well, you did right while you were inside. Just continue to do right when you get out. and there's many more factors that play into that really put people back inside.
Yeah, and I would echo that sentiment, but I would also add that inside of prison there are groups that people become part of in order to be safe. So I would say though that in some instances the people who quote unquote find God or turn to Islam or other groups are looking also for protection. Mm-hmm. So you have to sift through the people, those circumstances for each individual, because I think it's easy to look at the people who are inside who do have a religious experience and lump them all together and then hold each person to account for that assumption that you make when they get out, because each person is an individual and each faith is individual. And so I would say that being in prison and quote unquote finding God is an individual experience, not so much a one size fits all set of circumstances.
Definitely. And I think that's a good segue into your story, because so again, you found religion, you found God. What made what made that click for you? What made it a really life-changing experience that has carried you as you've done almost your entire bid?
Right. Yeah. I think my first two prison numbers, that I had nothing to do with God. So I don't want people to think that I go to prison, find God. I go to prison, get out, do something bad, go back to prison, find God, get out, do something bad, and go back to prison and find God. That's not my circumstances. My first two prison numbers, I had nothing to do with God. I wanted Him to be as far from me as possible. So, but on this prison number, I think really what changed is I didn't want to die. I think sometimes you have to come face to face with what you're asking for. And what I was asking for the previous 8 years was death. And when I was faced with it, after getting this large amount of time and contemplating suicide, I came to the realization that I didn't want that. I wanted to live. You know, I had a son out there that was waiting on me, and then I had another son who was born in CCA Leavenworth, which was a prison in Leavenworth. He was born inside, and his grandma picked him up from the jail and brought him down to visit me, in which she held him up to the glass. It was life-changing. I was already broken spiritually, and God was working on me. And when I saw Adias, that's his name, through the glass, it just changed me. And I wanted more. I wanted to be more for him. And so I think that is when it really changed for me, was that day. And then God took me through it, you know, started breaking things off of me and setting me right. And I think I never really experienced true change. And I'd have the remorse experiences where you run to the altar and cry out to God, and then go right back to doing what you were doing. And so but I never had the experience where God takes you and pulls you to himself and starts to change you. And I think inside of, you know, CCA 11, which was the prison I was in at that time, is when God got a hold of me and changed my life.
Wow. So, okay, we got a few minutes, so I think I want to segue and talk just a tiny bit more about, because you've been, like, just what you've been up to on the inside, and then what you've been up to the inside, and a little bit about, I want to hear a little bit more about your fatherhood piece, because I know that has been a growing relationship. So if you can just highlight some of the things you've been doing on the inside, whether it's ministry related, whether it's not ministry related, because I know your book is a little bit of both, and just touch a little bit on fatherhood. And then when we come back for the next our next conversation, then we'll pick up and try to pick up with the book and a little bit about that and what you're getting ready to do after prison. All right, so talk to a little bit about that. We probably got like 2 minutes left, 2-3 minutes. So hit me with some highlights.
Okay, well, in my first 8 years of prison, I started a prison ministry in Tecumseh, Nebraska, which went on a prison yard and prayed for guys and spread God's message of change and redemption. And so it started at one prison, ended up in all the men's prisons in Nebraska. Started from one guy and a bag of snacks and some prayer requests to dozens and dozens of guys who were involved. I think we've had one guy who's gotten out, who came back to prison, who was involved in the ministry. So a really, really effective ministry. Let's see. When I came to the feds, I've been really just focusing on my writing, really, since I've been here, which has really been my main focus. I think on the fatherhood tip, that these last 15 years inside, that I've watched one son grow from being, right next to me as he's grown, visits all the time, conversations on the phone all the time, and juxtapose that with my other son, Sam, who's about, I think he's 21 now, 23. He'll be 23 this year, dang.
Wow.
But watching him grow from a distance, I think that having my two sons and having those two experiences have really taught me what it is to be a man, to be able to, chase after one son and not give up, which would be Sam, and then also to have the other son right next to me and to be able to really invest in him and see him grow and see him become a man. It really gives me an appreciation what fatherhood means, that it's not just about being able to invest in one son, but to be able to suffer and long for another one and never to give up. So, which is kind of a metaphor.
This call is from a federal prison.
Which is really a metaphor for what God has done for me. So, yeah, I think that's what I've been doing for the last 15 years is, serving God and trying to be the best father I can be and the best man I can be.
That's dope. I think that's a good note to end it on, because I think they're going to probably cut us here real soon. But let's call back. I'll wait and we'll call back and we'll finish up talking a little bit about your sons, because I think that is so dope, being challenged to do that. And then we'll connect a little bit about the book, Riverside, Epiphany, and talk about that. All right, you there?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So let's pick back up where we left off, recapping real quick so we can make sure you don't have to call me back again, but try to get into as much as we can. But yeah,
Yeah,
this has truly been a blessing, man, and an awesome conversation thus far. So recapping real quick, we were talking about a little bit about family, about fatherhood, being in prison, your story, and I wanted to hit back on one thing to just clarify, if you can, for us real quick. Tell us a little bit about, if you can, the you being incarcerated in terms of like how'd you end up getting caught. Tell people the difference between federal time and regular time. Just talk us through that real briefly.
Okay. I found myself in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when I was running out of money, and so I called my older brother. And so normally what my cycle was is that whenever I'd get in trouble, I would invariably call my older brother, because my older brother was like my mentor, and so I knew that he would be able to communicate to my mom and to the rest of the family that I was okay, that I wasn't, dead in the ditch anywhere. And so I called him up and I let him know that I was okay, and he asked me to call him back a little bit later. So I called him back a little bit later. What I didn't know is that he had called the federal police and let them know where I was at. So now when I called him, they were waiting on me, and so they arrested me there at the scene. I was, taken to jail, and so then that's how I was caught.
Okay.
The difference between state and federal prison, I would say, is state prison, you're at home, so you're closer to family, friends, loved ones. Whereas in the Fed, you're further away. I would say, as far as the atmosphere goes inside of prison, state is more accepting. There's not so much racial tension, gang activity, to whereas when you come to the federal system, it's steeped in racial issues and gang activity, because you have so many people from so many different areas all in one prison that
this call is from a federal prison.
That they click up together. And so you have a lot more people, clicking together in order to survive the prison experience. As where in the state facility, you're right there in your own backyard. So there's no need for that type of grouping together for protection.
That makes sense. Okay, so let's transition and switch gears, because again, time is our enemy at the moment. Let's talk a little bit more about family. Okay. So you talked about your sons and being able to transition and raise them from behind bars to a certain extent. But you also mentioned to me that it was a little bit of that which sparked you to want to begin writing and to write books. So talk a little bit about that. Connect those dots with the writing and with you fatherhood, raising kids and stuff behind bars.
Right. So, being in prison and being a father is a tough thing. And so my oldest son, Sam, was struggling in school. So I was trying to think of ways that I could, maybe spark an interest in in education, really just to spark an interest in reading, because I know that for me, reading books opened up a whole new world for me intellectually, that I've experienced so much growth through reading. And so I was trying to spark that hunger in him. So I started writing Riverside, Epiphany, and I wrote that book. I don't even know if you read it, but I think it was the journey of writing it and trying to produce something for him that that really sparked that hunger for me to continue to try to communicate my story, God's truths, through writing.
Awesome. Yeah, my official book came. I read some of the transcript that you sent me, and so I think the book is dope. I mean, it captivated me in the beginning, just kind of reading like the beginning, the life decision where it's like somebody's in the trunk and then they end up in the river and then the car is sinking. I was like, okay, I didn't know what to expect, so I was like, okay. So for the folks who are tuning into the broadcast, have no clue what Riverside Epiphany is, without spoiling too much, just give them a snapshot of like what this book is about.
Okay, well, Riverside Epiphany is about Lincoln Charles Jr. He's a person who was born into a criminal family, lives a certain way, ends up going to prison, having a finding God experience, gets out of prison and gets put back into a situation where he has to choose whether or not he's going to continue to follow God or go back to his his old ways. I think that in writing it, I wanted to create a story that had characters who weren't your usual suspects, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to have your cookie cutter, person who comes from a life that is not tough. I wanted my characters to struggle, to have that struggle, to struggle on page, and to struggle through real life scenarios, because I think that's what the Christian walk is that it's not easy, it's not pretty sometimes. Sometimes it's a struggle, and sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we want to do something that we used to do, and we have to decide whether or not we want to continue to follow God or, go back to what we used to do.
Exactly. And I think the cool thing about the book is that I love how you, again, I think you put those elements of what honesty is in terms of like this walk that we have, because it's I think sometimes when people think of Christians, and granted there's a lot of wacky Christians out there, I like to call them that, wacky people who believe, but in the simplest form, I think us having faith, if you bring it down to the simplest thing, us having faith a lot of times ends up being our umbrella. So it's not saying that we won't have rain and we won't have issues and drama in our life, but that umbrella, that safetyness of having kind of God, us being under God's umbrella, just helps us to be able to deal with life, to conquer it, and really have hope at the end of the day. That's all it's about. Because again, it says the rain will rain upon the just and the unjust. So it's like we all go through drama. We have life trials, circumstances that always try to knock us all off of our game. But I think just what my faith has taught me is that, man, I have so much hope in my future, even when things don't seem like it's going to turn out right. I just have hope and faith. Like, okay, I've gotten through some before, so let me keep it moving. Let me keep it pushing. So that is, I think, the positivity of what faith can do and what has done, I think, in my life, and if you can attest to it to your life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I know that I wouldn't be where I am now without my faith in God. That if I would not have given my life to God those years ago in Leavenworth, that I wouldn't be standing here. I wouldn't have made it through this number. And so I know that my experiences inside have.
This call is from a federal prison.
Have shown me that because let me say this. I think that growing up in the church, or growing up around the church like I did, I had this view of Christians that once you gave your life to Christ, that somehow you were transported from the real world, quote unquote, to this upper room, so to speak, and that you wouldn't face the circumstances that most people face. So when I finally did give my life to the Lord, I realized that that's not the case. That when we humble ourselves and accept Christ as our Savior, that we are not somehow transported to a different realm. We still live in this world. We still suffer the consequences of our actions. I didn't give my life to Christ, and the judge didn't come in and say, okay, never mind, Aaron's changed now. You can leave. That's not how it works. I still had to stay in prison. I still had to do my time. So I wanted to communicate in this story that, even though Lincoln, who is the main character, gives his life to God, he still has to go through the winnowing fork. He still has to be tested and shown to be approved. And so that's what his story is about. It's about, whether or not he's going to break, whether or not he's going to say, you know what, this isn't for me. I'm going to go back and do the things that I used to do. And so
I love that. I love that. Yeah, man, really is
I try to put in there.
Yeah, it really is an awesome story of hope and that redemption, and it does make it real relatable. All right, so the last few minutes that we have to wrap up, share with the people like what's next, and I'll comment real quick just to say, like, this book, guys, is on Amazon. You can order it. It's not anybody sometimes today in today's age can write a book, but no, Aaron is backed by a publishing house. Like, he's really doing it and really making his dream of becoming an authentic writer a reality. So the first step is this book, but this is only the first step of many to come. So give us just a quick snapshot of like what else is going on with you. When are you getting out? What's next on the agenda? What are you thinking about in your brain as your time and everything is starting to wind down?
Right. Yeah, I got about 3 years left. Right now I'm producing. I've been trying to focus on writing. I've jumped from books to screenplays, so I'm writing a few screenplays. But my next book, Morning into Dancing, comes out in the wintertime. And that is a book that it's really a table topic of Christian issues. You know, from being in leadership in a prison ministry, one thing that I've learned is that there are some issues that have become taboo for us, you know, as Christians, that we don't really talk about, things like race or homosexuality or grief or doubting our faith, or these types of issues that if we were to speak on them, we feel like on the inside, if we were to say things to our friends, hey, I doubt, or hey, I'm grieving, or hey, what about race, that would somehow undermine our faith, that we would be somehow lesser Christians. So the next book that I have coming out in the winter is Mooring into Dancing, and it's a compilation of short stories that just, you know, deal with these issues, bring out my ideas onto paper, not really as a judgment on those issues, but just really as a conversation starter to get people to think outside the box, be able to talk to each other. So I think that as we walk with the Lord and grow together, that we grow stronger.
Awesome.
And we are able to admit to each other that we deal with these things, that our fellowship with one another and with God gets deeper. So yeah, that's just really what I'm doing right now, is just trying to focus on writing things that aren't inside the box of normal Christian life. I want to instigate thought, instigate growth in people. So
awesome. I love that, bro.
Yeah,
I love that. Okay, so I know again we may get cut off, but let's finish off with just inspire or just help give some lasting words of what you can do to say to people, to encourage them. If they have family members who are still just like struggling or incarcerated, they're still waiting for them to turn their lives around. What additional message of hope do you want to say to people who will listen to this broadcast about hearing your story, your life?
Well, that's a deep question right there.
I know it is.
I would say it's never too late. You know, it's never too late for your loved one, for yourself. As long as there's breath in your lungs, there's an opportunity for Christ to come into your life and to change it, or Christ to come into your loved one's life and to change it. I think there have been, you know my mom, so you know how her struggle with, you know, being in my corner and praying and believing that something would change, even though in the face of reality, she's looking at a son who's robbing banks, high on drugs, running the streets. I mean, all the evidence in her face is telling her that I'm not going to make it. But she never gave up. She never stopped praying. God didn't stop sowing into me. So I would just tell people, never give up. As long as your loved one is alive, there's an opportunity for God to come into their life and change it. It just takes an opportunity, a chance, a whisker of a chance, the smallest of chances. God can do great things. Great things.
Awesome. Well, I know it's about to wrap up, but they're gonna take us off. Well, man, love you. I appreciate you. We will connect we'll email each other and connect here soon, bro. But I love you and take care.
Absolutely. Stay up.
All right. Till next time.
All right.
Peace.
Yep.
Well, there it is, guys. That is Aaron Pettis, my dear friend, who's finishing out his 15-year bid for prison bank robbery. And I hope that story inspires you, motivates you to know that, like, again, as he mentioned, you're never too late. It's never too late to have a second chance, to be hopeful, and things can turn around. Giving you a little backstory, I did meet Aaron through his mom back in my local church some years ago. So he was already incarcerated at that time. But over the course of, 7+ years, we have developed a friendship and, again, really have just connected, and we talk and we email and all that good stuff. So, man, I just hope that story blessed you guys. And I think that's it, man. So till next time, encouraging the fathers, encouraging the dads, please share this video. Pick up his book to encourage and continue to motivate and spread the message. And we'll keep conquering this thing together. So till next time, peace and blessings. Real men get it done.